What if Pakistan transformed from an economically struggling nation into one of the world's most powerful economies? In this investigative documentary, we explore Pakistan's hidden potential, massive youth population, strategic location, IT boom, China Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, mineral wealth, agriculture, military industrial capacity, and the reforms that could change its future forever. Using recent reports from the IMF, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, economic analysts, and global experts, this documentary examines whether Pakistan could realistically become an economic superpower by 2050. Can Pakistan overcome corruption, political instability, energy crises, debt, and institutional failures? Or is the country sitting on untapped potential larger than the world realizes? This film presents a balanced, investigative, monetization-safe analysis of Pakistan's possible economic future. For decades, Pakistan has appeared in global headlines for all the wrong reasons: political instability, debt crises, inflation, security challenges, power shortages, and economic uncertainty. To many observers around the world, Pakistan is often described as a country permanently struggling to survive. But beneath the surface of those headlines, another story exists, a story rarely explored in full. A story about geography, population, technology, resources, trade routes, demographics, and untapped economic potential. Because despite all its challenges, Pakistan sits at the center of one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. It has a population of more than 240 million people, one of the world's youngest workforces, a rapidly growing technology sector, nuclear capability, massive agricultural land, critical mineral reserves, and direct access to the Arabian Sea through Gwadar port. Some economists believe that if structural reforms continue, Pakistan could eventually become one of the most influential economies in the Muslim world, perhaps even beyond. But others warn that without deep institutional reform, the country may remain trapped in cycles of crisis. So tonight, we ask one question: what if Pakistan became an economic superpower? Not through fantasy, not through propaganda, but through realistic economic transformation. What would change? Who would benefit? Who would resist it? And how would it reshape South Asia, the Middle East, and the global balance of power? This is the untold future of Pakistan. To understand Pakistan's future, we first need to understand its contradiction. Pakistan is simultaneously rich and poor, powerful and fragile, strategic yet unstable. It possesses enormous potential, but struggles to convert that potential into sustainable growth. According to recent reports from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, Pakistan's economy has shown signs of stabilization after years of crisis. Inflation eased, foreign reserves improved, and reforms began attracting cautious optimism from international institutions. The Asian Development Bank also noted that economic reforms and tighter fiscal policies helped stabilize parts of the economy after severe financial pressure. But stabilization is not the same as transformation. Pakistan still faces enormous structural problems: debt dependency, political polarization, tax collection weaknesses, energy inefficiency, low industrial productivity, and widespread distrust in institutions. Yet history shows that countries can change rapidly. South Korea transformed from poverty into a technological powerhouse. China lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty within decades. Singapore went from instability to one of the world's most advanced economies. So the real question is not whether transformation is possible. The real question is whether Pakistan can unlock the systems required for long-term growth. And surprisingly, some of those systems may already be emerging. One of Pakistan's greatest economic assets is not oil, or gold, or natural gas. It is people. Nearly two-thirds of Pakistan's population is under the age of 30. That means millions of young workers are entering the labor market every year. In economic terms, this is called a demographic dividend. If educated and employed correctly, a young population can fuel decades of economic expansion. But if ignored, it can create instability, unemployment, and social pressure. This is the crossroads Pakistan now faces. And increasingly, technology is becoming part of that story. Pakistan's IT exports have risen significantly in recent years. Reports in 2025 and 2026 showed record growth in software exports, freelancing, and digital services. Some analysts now describe Pakistan as one of the fastest growing freelance economies in the world. Thousands of young Pakistanis are earning income online through software development, AI services, design, cybersecurity, and digital marketing. Unlike traditional industries, technology requires less physical infrastructure. A laptop and internet connection can create global income streams. And this matters enormously because countries that dominate technology often gain disproportionate economic influence. India demonstrated this with its IT revolution. Today, India's IT exports exceed hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Pakistan's numbers are still far smaller, but the growth trajectory has attracted attention. Even online communities discussing Pakistan's future increasingly focus on tech growth and digital exports. One Reddit user wrote that young Pakistanis are attracted to tech because of higher wages and better work life balance. Another argued that Pakistan could become highly competitive in AI and remote digital services. These conversations may seem small, but they reflect a broader shift. A generation no longer waiting for traditional government jobs, a generation increasingly connected to the global digital economy. And if this sector continues growing, it could fundamentally reshape Pakistan's economic future. But technology alone cannot transform a nation of 240 million people. Infrastructure matters, energy matters, trade routes matter. And this brings us to one of the most controversial projects in modern South Asian history, CPEC, the China Pakistan Economic Corridor. For supporters, CPEC is the foundation of Pakistan's future rise. For critics, it risks increasing dependency and debt. But regardless of political opinion, its strategic importance cannot be ignored. CPEC connects Western China to the Arabian Sea through Pakistan. Roads, ports, energy projects, railways, industrial zones, and logistics infrastructure. At the center stands Gwadar Port, a location many analysts believe could eventually become one of the most strategically valuable trade hubs in the region. Why? Because geography shapes economics, and Pakistan's geography is extraordinary. It borders China, India, Iran, and Afghanistan. It sits near the Gulf Energy Corridor, and it provides China with alternative maritime access. In global trade, location is power. Historically, nations controlling trade routes became wealthy, from the Ottoman Empire to Singapore to Dubai. Pakistan's leadership has long argued that the country could become a bridge connecting Central Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, and China. If managed effectively, this could transform Pakistan into a regional logistics and manufacturing hub. But there is one major condition: stability. Without political consistency, investors hesitate. Without security, trade slows. Without institutional trust, large-scale industrialization struggles. This is why economic transformation requires more than infrastructure. It requires governance, and governance remains Pakistan's greatest challenge. Many economists argue that Pakistan does not primarily suffer from a lack of resources. It suffers from weak systems. Tax collection remains relatively low compared to many emerging economies. Large portions of the economy remain undocumented. State-owned enterprises often operate inefficiently. Energy losses drain public finances, and corruption allegations continue damaging investor confidence. International institutions repeatedly emphasize the same message: reforms are essential. The IMF recently highlighted Pakistan's commitment to fiscal reforms, energy restructuring, competition, and productivity improvements. The World Bank also stressed the need for structural reforms, export growth, and institutional modernization. In simple terms, Pakistan's future may depend less on discovering new wealth and more on managing existing wealth effectively. Countries rarely become economic superpowers through resources alone. They become powerful through systems, efficient institutions, reliable laws, transparent governance, and predictable economic policy. Without those elements, even rich nations struggle. Still, Pakistan possesses one major advantage many countries envy: resilience. Despite repeated crises, the country continues adapting. Floods, political unrest, currency pressure, global inflation, security threats. Yet the economy repeatedly stabilizes rather than collapsing entirely. International lenders continue engaging Pakistan because global institutions recognize something important: Pakistan is too strategically significant to ignore. And increasingly, global powers are competing economically across Asia. China expands influence through infrastructure. India grows through manufacturing and technology. Gulf states diversify investments. Western nations seek new supply chains. In this competition, Pakistan could either become a major participant or fall behind. The next decade may determine which path emerges. Now imagine a different future. Imagine Pakistan successfully reforms taxation, modernizes ports, expands digital education, improves energy reliability, reduces political instability, strengthens exports, and attracts manufacturing investment. What happens next? First, massive urban transformation. Cities like Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, and Gwadar could evolve into regional economic hubs. New industrial corridors would emerge. Technology parks would expand. Foreign companies would open regional offices. Young professionals would remain inside Pakistan instead of emigrating. Second, the middle class would grow dramatically. Historically, stable middle classes transform societies. They increase consumer spending, education demand, property markets, entrepreneurship, and political accountability. Third, Pakistan's geopolitical influence would rise significantly. Economic strength changes diplomatic relationships. Countries with strong economies gain negotiating power, investment leverage, regional influence, and global visibility. A stronger Pakistani economy would reshape regional trade dynamics across South Asia and the Middle East. But economic superpowers also face scrutiny. If Pakistan became economically powerful, regional rivalries could intensify. Global powers might compete more aggressively for influence. Domestic inequality could increase if growth remains concentrated among elites, and rapid urbanization could strain infrastructure. History shows that economic growth alone does not automatically create social justice. China grew rapidly but faced inequality concerns. India expanded economically while still confronting poverty challenges. Even advanced economies struggle balancing growth with fairness. So the future of Pakistan would not only depend on economic expansion, but on how that growth is distributed. Would rural populations benefit? Would education improve nationwide? Would institutions strengthen? Or would wealth remain concentrated? These questions matter because sustainable power requires social stability. Another critical factor is climate. Pakistan remains highly vulnerable to floods, water stress, and extreme weather. The devastating floods of recent years exposed infrastructure weaknesses and economic vulnerability. International institutions increasingly warn that climate resilience will shape Pakistan's economic future. This means future development cannot follow old industrial models alone. Pakistan may need to invest heavily in renewable energy, water management, and climate adaptation. Ironically, this challenge could also become an opportunity. Countries leading green infrastructure and renewable development may dominate future investment flows. If Pakistan modernizes energy systems effectively, it could reduce import dependence while attracting international climate financing. And in a world increasingly shaped by sustainability, that could become a major strategic advantage. Then there is the military dimension. Pakistan already possesses one of the world's largest armed forces and nuclear capability. If combined with significant economic growth, the country's global influence would increase dramatically. Historically, major powers combine economic and military capability. The United States, China, Russia. Economic power funds technological innovation, defense production, and diplomatic reach. Pakistan already has a growing defense manufacturing sector. Economic expansion could accelerate aerospace, cybersecurity, AI defense systems, and indigenous industrial production. But economic power also creates responsibility. Nations with larger influence face greater international expectations. Regional diplomacy becomes more important. Conflict management becomes more critical. And economic interdependence often changes strategic calculations. Some analysts argue that strong trade relationships reduce conflict incentives. If Pakistan became economically interconnected with regional economies, the geopolitical landscape of South Asia itself could evolve. Yet, perhaps the biggest transformation would not be military or diplomatic or even technological. It would be psychological. For decades, many Pakistanis have grown up hearing narratives of crisis, economic weakness, instability, dependency. Imagine instead a generation raised during sustained growth, a generation believing opportunity exists at home, a generation building global companies from Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar, and Islamabad. National psychology matters more than many people realize. Countries often rise when populations begin believing progress is possible and decline when hopelessness becomes normalized. Economic transformation changes how citizens see themselves and how the world sees them. But can Pakistan realistically become an economic superpower? The honest answer is complicated. Possible? Yes. Guaranteed? Absolutely not. The path would require decades of consistency, institutional reform, political maturity, educational investment, export competitiveness, and social stability. Many nations with great potential never fully transformed. Others exceeded every expectation. Right now, Pakistan stands somewhere in between, a country with enormous potential and equally enormous obstacles. Recent economic indicators suggest cautious optimism. International institutions acknowledge stabilization efforts. Technology exports are growing. Digital entrepreneurship is expanding. Infrastructure investment continues. Reform discussions remain active. But critics remain skeptical. Many argue that deep political polarization continues damaging investor confidence. Others warn that dependence on international lending remains dangerous. Some point to recurring governance problems and institutional weakness. And these concerns are legitimate because economic transformation requires long term continuity, not short term headlines. Still, history rarely moves in straight lines. Nations once dismissed can rise unexpectedly. Few predicted China's transformation decades ago. Few imagined South Korea becoming a technology leader after war. Few expected Gulf economies to become global financial centers. The future often belongs to countries capable of adapting faster than expected. And Pakistan's story is still unfinished. So, what if Pakistan became an economic superpower? Global trade routes could shift. South Asia's balance of power could evolve. Millions could escape poverty. Technology industries could explode. Regional diplomacy could change. And one of the world's most strategically important nations could finally unlock its long discussed potential. But if reforms fail, if instability continues, if institutions remain weak, then the opportunity may slowly fade. Because in economics, potential alone means nothing. Execution changes history. And perhaps that is the real story of Pakistan. Not whether it has potential, but whether it can finally convert that potential into reality. The next 20 years may answer that question, not only for Pakistan, but for the entire region. Because if Pakistan rises economically, the world will feel the impact. And if it does not, the consequences will also echo far beyond its borders. The future remains unwritten, but one thing is certain: the race for economic power in Asia is accelerating, and Pakistan, whether ready or not, is already part of that race. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more investigative geopolitical and economic analysis. What do you think? Could Pakistan realistically become an economic superpower one day, or are the challenges simply too large? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to support this channel, like the video and share it with others interested in the future of global economics and geopolitics. Thank you for watching.